Hope is a precarious thing these days. I don't have to tell you how the world feels like nothing but a barrage of incentives to give up any vision for the future, as its definite demise had seemingly been decided by the capital class in order to get away with everything and consolidate as much wealth as humanly possible on the sinking ship. I just wrote Peter to feel effigy after this. This sentiment has very evidently bled into popular art, whether it be music, film, or video games. Our culture seems forever and solely torn between nostalgia and dystopia, which in many cases is just another repackaged nostalgia. I don't know if we can ever get out of this consumerist, self-indulgent reverie. It's one hell of a drug. All I've listened to in the past month is a 9-year-old defunct hip-hop boy band, still the best to ever do it. But what I am sure of is that as long as I have my head on my shoulders, I will struggle. I will try to say something insightful, something that moves you, something that, hopefully, makes imagining a future besides the end of everything a little easier. And I'm so glad I'm not alone. Recently, I've played a few English indie visual novels that were not only inspiring on an artistic level, but also invigorating in the I don't think culture's cooked forever kind of way, which may seem incredibly dramatic for a set of games that run you a total of 25% of Persona 5 with about 0.001% of the audience reach, but that's exactly why they are worth talking about. These are projects made by no more than 10 people working part-time, independently, with open source software, often under a time limit of a game jam for any sort of visibility. Despite all of these constraints, these games turn out engaging and meaningful. That alone is a fucking miracle. You know how hard it is to make a thing? But to freaks like me, these games are also fascinating as influence spotting whack-a-mole, so I scream out obnoxiously, "Is that Ayumi reference?" every 3 seconds. They are, at once, the very essence of independent creativity, utterly disengaged with popular appeal to write stories their way with their hearts fully on their sleeves, and unabashed love letters to their influences. Because first and foremost, these creators, like me, are just fans. Not always, but generally, Tumblr-right freak beasts, a compliment, who grew up loving anime, visual novels, and other nerd shit, taking their ideas and textures to make authentically gayer, weirder, kinkier games. If you don't see how that's a net positive for humanity, stop watching this channel. We currently live in a monoculture devoid reality, where everybody is isolated not only interpersonally, but also culturally, as we are trapped in algorithms that effortlessly act as both provocateurs and echo chambers. Elon Musk waterboard. But these games prove that the spirit of inspiration can be carried forward, and we can continue to iterate on what came before to make something original and impactful. Playing these visual novels, I feel like the medium and the cultural touchstones I loved have found a home. I feel like I can envision a future where culture not only lives on, but thrives. And that's all I'm really ever asking for in a piece of art. So here's 4 indie VNs that revitalize my love for the human spirit, with light spoilers until I say otherwise. As far as I know, itch.io isn't the best at giving games visibility, nor is Steam, so I really do hope this curation effort will bring some well-deserved attention to these stories. You can also recommend other titles to me in the comments. And hey, maybe these games will inspire you to create something of your own one day. If making this video has taught me anything, it's that anybody who has the drive, the community, and the dedication can carry the flame. Wait, no, wait!
Did you laugh or cry at Romeo and Juliet? Before I knew it, your sweet words became poison. But I'm not afraid. With a kiss, even a lily can kill a tiger.
Epicon's butterfly effect starts off just like any other dating sim. Set in early 2000s America, you play as Damien, a non-remarkable guy who wants to find the love of his life in college, right before becoming acquainted with 2 pairs of girls that fit archetypes of girl boss mommy, spunky tomgirl, shy nerd, and popular girl respectively. But soon after this point, he feels that something is off. The relationship these girls have with each other feels inextricably gnarled, and when Damien threatens to encroach on whatever's going on, they turn scary. If the slightly ominous preview CG on the itch.io page didn't already give it away, this game is not nearly as quaint as it purports to be. But I promise you, it's unlike any other cutesy VN with a dark twist that you will ever play. Do look at the content warnings though, for sure. Choices in visual novels and games in general are usually interpreted as an avenue to player freedom. Open world sandboxes flaunt the amount of stuff you can do in them, and VNs like Scarlet Hollow are acclaimed for how choices drastically alter the narrative. Dating sims and bishoujo games are maybe one of the purest distillations of choices providing audiences agency, because they gamify one of the most obfuscated things in life: attraction. In these games, picking the right thing will get you the right girl/boy, and realize myriad of vibe checks and circumstances that break most relationships are comfortably abstracted. But as Foucault will tell you, a choice only frees as much as it limits. What appears as player expression is nevertheless arbitrarily guided by the game, the discourse's permission structures, and necessarily means the erasure of something else. This is what Butterfly Effect narrativizes. The game adopts and then breaks the framework of dating sims to make the players acutely aware of that discourse's limits, leaving something unfamiliar and hostile behind. Like usual, many dialogue and action choices are given to you, but what you choose never truly affects the protagonist's characterization as a pathetic, objectifying nice guy, and barely changes the affection any of the girls have towards him. The traditional route to a dignified ending is locked off, and you are left alienated to your self-insert, helpless as he continues to be a piece of shit outside of your control. The game shocks you one last time in its endings, where the options you pick to pursue one girl actively leads you to the opposite ending whose specifics I will not spoil, literally having the horrific hidden contours of those choices, the dismissed parts of the framework, lashing out after you revel in your apparent agency. I don't really know what to call it, mechanical horror? Either way, it's really fascinating. Butterfly Æffect doesn't need to be engaged with on that abstract of a level though. Being a 6-week game jam project, it feels scrappy in all the right ways, and it's clear that the team was more eager to just realize an idea rather than consolidate a single message. From the postmortem, which I highly recommend you read after you finish the VN, you can tell that this project was an amalgamation of so many things. It's a throwback to early 2000s American otaku culture remembered with an attention to detail that I don't really see anywhere else. Rain, the nerdy shy girl archetype who you would expect to have no friends, is actually an incredibly popular yaoi legend online, which makes way more sense if you think about it. The design sheet for Gabrielle, the popular girl and the vice president for the anime club, is inspired by rebuilding what you can find in a scanned Japanese fashion magazine at a local American mall. I just think that's really neat. It's also a game deeply concerned with gender, queerness, and the objectifying lens dating sims kind of inherently have. And if you read Damien's pathetic behavior as an externalization of that lens, the game's events in a strange way becomes a reclaiming of agency by the bishoujo in bishoujo games. Of course, that's not even mentioning the generally great writing, chock full of witty dialogue, and surprisingly deep characterization that only becomes more fascinating on rereads. Even our loser punching bag wannabe fuckboy is written with enough humanity to make you empathize a little with how naive his puppy dog version of love is. However, what I want to highlight is once again, the ending stretch. Despite all the dark, daring, and perverse places it goes to, Butterfly Æffect felt shockingly grounded by the end, without having to resort to existential metafuckery to mess his anime girls up. Without giving too much away, I attribute that to how the writers carefully made it so that everything felt like an extension of the character's central flaws. Even when the darkness doesn't fully make sense on a logical level, it still resonates because it's not emotionally jarring. In this way, the cheery exterior becomes inextricable from the grimy, spiteful interior. I guess you can say it's kind of Lynchian. After my first playthrough, I wanted to call Butterfly Æffect a subversion or deconstruction of bishoujo games, because I feel like it mostly is that, but that alone would also be doing it a disservice. Any glimpse at the promotional material and the postmortem, or even just the effort put into every orifice of this game, it's clear that these guys love visual novels and presumably romance visual novels. They're not coming at this genre from a purely critical or, worse, ironic lens like fucking Class of 09. It is, as the itch.io page says, every bit a love letter to bishoujo games. It's just not a blind love letter. It's a retrospective one. Look, as a teen, I loved every bit of the Monogatari series, and now, as a slightly older, slightly more socially aware person, I find many of its elements questionable at best. But there is no way I can ever fully disavow the story. So much of my aesthetic sensibilities and understanding of art in general has been influenced by it that doing so would basically be throwing parts of myself away. I think a similarly complex relationship with bishoujo games can be found in Butterfly Æffect. Its scathing critique only works because it comes from a place of deep familiarity. A generation raised on weeb culture who now, as weathered adults, have to confront their frustrations with something that nevertheless meant a lot to them. The result is a wonderfully poignant, sometimes excruciating embrace that, as the game reminds you, is way better than any kind of obsessive love. I don't really know how common this type of experience with art is, but in a way, I think it should be. What's more human than change, than reevaluating your past in measured ways that avoid both nostalgia and self-denial? Isn't that the only way forward? That's probably what drags me back to this game again and again, beyond the abstract deconstructions and the entertainment value. Butterfly Æffect is art which could only happen right here, right now, with everything and everyone that's come before. And I think that's worth celebrating. Man, these guys at Epicon can make one hell of a visual novel. I wonder what else they've done. Here's a public service announcement. If you, like me, detest most multiplayer games, but want to bond with friends through media, may I suggest playing visual novels together? It might be hard if your buddies have very different reading paces, but if you're dedicated to take it slow, do different voices, have discussions in between, and generally try to have a good time, it can be incredibly rewarding. I've only started doing it recently, and the games I've experienced with friends have already taken on special, meaningful places in my heart. I associate it with time spent with the people I love, shout out to them if you're watching, and feel way more invested in their stories. Not that I needed much convincing with this one. 1483. A nun is killed in an isolated monastery up the mountains. The anchoress, who took an oath to never leave her cell, spending decades of her life dedicated to the words of God, is the only one who couldn't have done it. She's thrust into a precarious social situation and possibly haunted environment with the goal to find the murderer, before an innocent man gets blamed, or more tragedies befall the convent. The premise grips anybody interested in the convergence of period pieces and murder mysteries, but the core of Misericorde, a grounded, compelling character study, unravels patiently and quietly over its first of 3 volumes. When the story started with a sheltered protagonist who doesn't understand anything about the outside world, I thought I knew where we were going with this. She's going to be another audience surrogate that conveniently allows the writer to fill in everything we need to know about the setting and the characters so that we can get into the Honkaku investigating. But to my surprise, Misericorde decides to do almost the complete opposite. Sister Hedwig, the anchoress turned chronicler/undercover detective, is a fucking mess. Her isolation is not taken as a handy narrative device but an agonizing struggle to adapt. Her body is frail, fainting and puking at every turn in the first few days, and her deeply sheltered, deeply religious perspective is consistently getting stunlocked by this abbey's less restrictive rules. Of course, this is no typical culture shock. This is an existential issue of faith to Hedwig. In her mind, she condemns the sinful nature of her fellow sisters, all the while the possibility of any of them committing the worst sin, murder, looms over her and drives her into paranoia. Most fascinating of all, her inner persecution extends furthest to herself. Having betrayed the oath with God to investigate this murder, having to lie to other people to do so, Hedwig is the biggest sinner in her own mind, rattled with guilt and self-hate that is so heart-wrenching to read. You can't really blame her for barely operating and not progressing the murder investigation throughout Volume 1. That time is instead filled out with slice of life featuring the other sisters. Slice of life is often dismissed as dull and uninteresting, especially in visual novels where the subpar prose usually rambles on for way too long. Misericorde's casual scenes, set in a bumfuck nowhere 15th century abbey, doesn't really bring itself any extra excitement points, but I think the game brilliantly takes advantage of that slow domesticity. It's not dull, it's repressed. That distinction is crucial. The convent's inhabitants are seemingly understanding of Sister Hedwig's situation. Almost none of them act openly hostile and are willing to include her in their activities. As a result, we are endeared to these sisters. Moira is the closest thing this place has to a nurse and the sweetest girl. Margaret and Catherine's two-woman sarcasm act is delightful. Darcy talks in all lowercase, so like an e-girl, or me. And Angela is... But the feeling that Hedwig is intruding on something delicate never really leaves. Even the most friendly sisters never tell her more than she needs to know, and the topic of Catherine with a C, the deceased, is almost never touched on. Every single character talks like they carry weight they can't express, maybe because of their faith or something else. So when that baggage is unleashed for a few brief scenes, the impact is fucking immense. If you think I've spoiled too much of the story, do not worry, because all of this is only thoughts gathered 3/4 into the first volume, which as far as I know doesn't hold a candle to the second and hopefully third. There are still so many places I promise you wouldn't expect the story to go. Misericorde is truly a sprawling indie epic that keeps impressing. And it's just so inspiring how all the art assets, the music, the programming were done by a single person, Cece. But of course, they learned from the best. Of course, if you go onto their YouTube page, you would see an instrumental cover of Dead Angle from Umineko. While I would have liked the story presented in any context, going into this series with the understanding that the creator is a big fan of Umineko really clicked its disparate aesthetic elements into place. For example, the game's monochromatic, pixelated, and often liminal CGs based on real photographs feel like a more coherent iteration of Ryukishi's early backgrounds. Only a fan of logic witch battles scorts of fucking hardcore trance will make a game about medieval nuns with trip-hop and bossa. And the hint of metafiction is well, I don't know where the fuck it's going, but definitely feels like Umineko. There's still minor similarities I can pick at, but I don't want to attribute Umineko as Misericorde's only inspiration. That would do a disservice to Cece's creativity. Still, a part of me does think that if Ryukishi's seminal work hadn't paved the way, this series might have not had the ambition to be that expansive on an indie budget, to combine that many elements into something unique and striking. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but either way, I'm heartened that one of my favorite stories can find its traces in works that are equally as jagged, charming, and beautiful. Just much gayer.
I need Sister Angela sideways, frontwards, backwards, upside down, 360 in the living room.
If all is right in the world, this game's going down as a modern classic. I cannot believe Of the Devil is a real thing that exists. Even in its incomplete state, it's already everything I've ever wanted from a visual novel, made by people who love all the same things I do, doing it better, bigger, and making bold choices at every turn. An Ace Attorney like set in a cyberpunk dystopia, with Danganronpa aesthetics, Monogatari series visual direction, the spirit of Umineko, and the characterization of like Zanegoto? Jesus Christ, don't even bother taking me to dinner, just fuck me already! Writing this section has been kind of a torment, because Of the Devil's quality and polish is just that self-evident to anybody who even has a peripheral interest in mystery adventure games. And to people inflicted with similar ball knowledge as the developers, their loving revival and reinvention of this subgenre even its creators got tired of is tantamount to an act of fucking divinity. No, the game isn't perfect, there's some mechanics and uninspired choices I can nitpick, but for the purposes of this video, which is to get you to play the damn games, I really don't think I can say anything to convince you better than the game's own hook. But please still let me make a point, like a real video essayist, so the people at End Circle are impressed and lets me playtest episode 4 or something. Please let me do it! It feels trite as hell to wax poetic about cyberpunk in 2026, especially when its aesthetic is so flanderized and detached from actual history that the most popular cyberpunk thing to come out this decade is a sequel taking place 50 years after a 1980s tabletop game's imagination of 2020. Its once striking social commentary and imagination has been reduced to marketable assets, woefully unprepared to tackle the far less sexy dystopia we're currently living in. I'm not gonna pretend Of the Devil doesn't paint in the broad strokes of its predecessors. Androids, body modification, surveillance corporate technocracy. It even preserves the contrast between an old-school lone hero romanticism of the westerns and the cold, cybernetic concrete it's enveloped in. But, to put it bluntly, being an indie project helmed by 4 people just gives it way more balls to say real shit. Disco Elysium writer Robert Kurvitz once talked about how he ensured much of the dialogue in their game was confrontational, as that was the best way to keep people engaged through the million-word, flowery prose. And I think something similar is employed here. From minute 1, our protagonist and the greatest character in any of these fucking things, Morgan Of the Devil from Of the Devil, captures your attention by piercing through the formalities of this repressive world with every jaded monologue. And as she's joined by other cynical fucks in the cast, the social critique only becomes more biting, more cathartic, while still remaining measured and realistic. Though I said Persona 5 was outlandish back in the day, and now it looks tame in comparison to real life, so I don't know anymore. But appropriately dire critique is not the only thing Of the Devil wants its future to be. After you complete each episode, you unlock a series of bonus scenarios that flesh out the world and the characters even more. I love all of these. Like Danganronpa's free time events, seeing the cast we've been following in casual situations brings a different dimension to them. And unlike some of their predecessors, these scenes in Of the Devil are integrated far more diegetically. One of them featuring Sato, the forensics doctor I'm very normal about, has been stuck in my head as I've continued to think about these games. It's a look into the ways body modification has changed the medical industry of this world, or more precisely, fused tech and medicine into one. A doctor will not understand how an able-bodied man is suddenly crashing down unless they keep up with the tech news that certain modifications are leaking lithium into people's systems. That totalizing alone I find pretty fascinating. But then, the focus shifts to an ornament on Sato's wall, an early 21st century pride flag. The conversation then becomes one about the symbol's nuances, that it's not a flag of queerness as much as it is a flag of visibility, and how the technology of 2086 has rendered trans visibility pretty much irrelevant. It doesn't mean that any part of the process is necessarily easier, it's just, as Sato so simply put it, different. But hey, there's nothing wrong with being different, right? Queer art has never been strangers to the visions of the future. Of the Devil is far from the first story to tie the trans experience to cyberpunk specifically. Understandably, a lot of times, what a futuristic setting means is simply an avenue to write empowering representation. For example, nobody questions that Bliss from Citizen Sleeper uses they/them pronouns. Considering that 2 of the first 10 words you will learn about Of the Devil are probably toxic yuri, it's clear that this game is no exception to that rule. But in the smaller moments, it also takes it upon itself to stare into an utterly bleak future, in which queerness, humanity as a whole, persisted nonetheless. 2086 is not a good time to live by any means, and it's quick to remind us that the 2020s to 30s is considered the dark period by its standards. But that pride flag ornament, that simple acknowledgement of our real history in the 2020s, already puts Of the Devil leagues apart, say, Cyberpunk 2077, and makes its future feel tangible. That tangibility, realized through a fictional world as well thought out as this one, makes me feel strangely assured that there is a way out of this. I don't know what it says about my worldview that I consider it really sucks, but at least we're still alive to be a hopeful message in 2026. But maybe we're all in need of something not even necessarily better, but just different. Because being different is beautiful. Play the game! Thank you for watching this far, and thank you all so much for the support on the last video. It means a lot that a video after such a long break still reached so many people. A reminder that YouTube has taken away my AdSense in a series of false AI policy detections that they have yet to answer for, and probably never will. While it means I now have basically no reason to chase views over creating authentic and good content, it also means that it'll be that much harder to get by financially. My silly but stubborn goal is to make a living on this platform while compromising as little as possible. And if you like what you see so far, I'd really appreciate it if you consider donating to my Patreon. I can't promise consistent extra content or anything in the immediate future, but if you have a question you want to ask me, I'll try to answer them in these intermissions. Oh, also, you get to see these videos a day early. I forgot to say that. You can do that as well, yeah. Like this one from Weisslander. What is the work of fiction you got disappointed over time with the most? As in, you were a fan, but later on started to hate it. I used to have a video on my channel about Oshinoko and how the manga got really bad later on, but even then, I don't think I really hated it. I think I consumed it in the same way I consumed Chinese web novels as a kid. Just cheap entertainment that was kind of satisfying because the good guy did the good thing, and then eventually Oshinoko spiraled into whatever the fuck it became, and I hope Akasaka's not burnt out, because he obviously was, and I just hope the best for him. And I took down that video because I didn't want to make anything that mean-spirited ever again, unless there's a really good reason. I don't really have something that I followed for a long time and then got disappointed over, which is probably a good thing. I like the things I like, and the things I don't like, I don't get that far into really care about it. For this video though, I want to thank Cake Moon, Karem, Nilay Agarwal, and Weisslander for supporting the channel. It means the world. Alright, let's get back to whatever this is. I think I saved the best for last. This is the real reason I wanted to make this video. Butterfly Effect and Misericorde deserve to be championed. Off the Devil's indie cred is already through the roof, but this 2-hour experience unraveled me and put me back together in a way I didn't even think was possible. I have to go full spoilers for this one. Why do we write stories? I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, it was a form of escape. As an ostracized quiet kid, I found solace in thinking up fantastical worlds I loved in other media. In my complicated teenage years, my writing shifted focus to this world, not as a way to confront it, but just to step back and disassociate. When my own confusing emotions, dysphoria, and reality were too much to deal with, I would start seeing my life as parts of a story I would one day pen. Themes I would one day pour into a work, something that will make my sad feelings, quote-unquote, worth it in the end. I didn't end up writing anything like that. And eventually, as more life passed me by and things like just continuing on got a little easier for muscle memory, I had no time to gaze at the mud for a conceptual victory. But I still wrote. Now, I write for the broken and beautiful people I've met along the way. I write to etch their figures, hearts, and thoughts deep in my memory. I write so I can continue to, or grow to, love them. As If Through Glass thoroughly destroyed me and made me want to spend a month talking about visual novels again, because I can tell that it's a work which came from and reflects upon that exact same place. The brainchild of Famicom's Alter, the creative director for Butterfly Effect, As If Through Glass tells the story of a few troubled Asian American high school girls circa 2012-ish. I was 6 and in Zhejiang, China in 2012, so many of the settings particular struck me as novel. The text blocks, the advent of touchscreens, Katsu from 2001 mentioned as a thing you just knew about, but the emotions explored within them haven't aged a day. I guess it's the game Lampshades. All depressed people kind of write the same. The protagonist Anisa's monologues, even in its first few lines, capture a certain dread I'd felt my entire middle to early high school life. For reasons I didn't entirely understand, my days were riddled with frustration, uncertainty, and the loathing towards people, primarily myself. I couldn't get myself to do anything, didn't want to do anything, but to be left alone. The world felt like a dangerous, strange, and unfamiliar place, and unfortunately, this was also the time I was expected to figure out my role in that place. Alter summarized it so beautifully and succinctly in the postmortem that I'll just copy what they said here. The really painful and well-understood thing about teen agony is that sometimes it really does reflect how hurtful the world is, and sometimes it's like a baby eating sour food for the first time, and both of them feel the same. So what do you do when all of that feels too confusing, too overwhelming? You retreat from the world. Everything stops feeling real. As if the scenery you see in front of you is but a series of layers constructed on top of each other, as if the people around you are mere templates and replicas, as if everything you feel, everything you touch, is through a plane of glass. The metaphor in the title is multifaceted and I think applies to so much in this little story, though if my read of it had an emotional core, it would be this pervasive, derealizing feeling, charging every character interaction with an innocent agony that I both relate to and deeply feel for. But that is merely the foundation the story sprawls from. Much like a picture refracted through glass, this game refuses a clean summary. If Butterfly Effect was a fascinating concept executed with flair and clarity, As If Through Glass is poetic, noisy, and disjointed. Scenes progressing the nominal narrative are frequently interjected by set pieces and Tumblr readmores exploring ideas that are all over the place in the way only truly authentic, borderline autobiographical art can pull off. Every time Anice's mom pops up, it's a gut punch to anybody with Chinese immigrant parents. It's really got the whole gauntlet. The stilted interactions, the overprotectiveness paired with the oddly brutal teardowns of your own child, the chasm between their life experience and yours, which will always pale in comparison to the pain they've endured. Oh my god, Alter broke into my house, that's what happened. The ways early internet gave teenagers an avenue to express themselves, but also to be preyed on, are depicted with all the gravity necessary. It's disheartening to see that girls like Emmy, who post through their trauma and objectify themselves with it, have never really gone away, even a decade later. Hell, even things in the game I didn't think I would relate to, like the Silicon Valley setting, managed to remind me of the painful rat race I was in at the top school in my country. More than a cohesive story, As If Through Glass is a collage of anxieties and fears whose disparate pieces will connect with everybody differently, and it's terrific for it. But despite its generally dour tone and apocalyptic conclusion, which I'll get to, what I came back to the most on replays is not the pain, it's the joy. I think of Anice and her best and maybe only friend, Jean, talking online with funny emoticons, teasing each other about whatever, and going to anime club. I notice how in their conversations, Jean is the one always trying to get Anice to talk, even mundane pleasantries, showing a genuine care in their relationship that Anice is too clouded to really convey. My absolute favorite scene is where they try on cosplay clothes for a convention the game never even shows. Anice, ever so dysphoric, hates how she looks. But before she could say anything, Jean screams that it's perfect, hugs her from behind, and pecks her on her cheek. Right before, she is easily disarmed by Anice's single line. You're shining. For this one moment, these probably sapphic girls, arms interlocked, are able to forget about their anxieties and inadequacies, and simply enjoy each other's company. I love it so much. The story's more muddled connections leave an equally strong impression, like the pseudo-friendship between Karis and Emmy, the adversarial relationship Emmy has with Anice, and the promise of burgeoning, jagged affections sprawled beneath. Beyond the lofty ideas, these tiny, mundane, and beautiful interactions between awkward teenagers define As If Through Glass more than anything in my head. I don't know if this means the story is in truth about love, or that I've come to love these characters so much through my rereads that the thing I want the most for them is to be happy. Probably a mix of both, or maybe it's neither. But before both the characters and the reader can see these bonds truly flourish, it all comes crashing down. In the finale, 3 of the 5 main characters, Emmy, Sunny, and Karis, abruptly end their own lives. The shock of their deaths comes from both a narrative level and the realization that we never fully understood them, as if we only ever saw them from a safe distance, as if they only knew each other through glass. Much like some of my favorite works like My Broken Mariko and All About Lily Chocho, the distance between humans is examined and explored as a type of tragic horror in of itself. Still, the sudden uprooting of everything we've gotten used to might have been jarring if Alter's consistently heart-wrenching writing didn't convey every grisly detail of its aftermath. Sunny's single mother laments that she should have never come to America, while Nisa's mother tells her that thank God, her daughter isn't stupid enough to do something like that. The education rat race reveals the disregard for the actual humans behind its achievements, and remains unceasing with no space for grief. Internet forums circle around to ridicule Emmy beyond her grave like a flock of incel crows. What's so striking at the end is seeing ideas and themes that initially felt disparate, overwhelming, much like Anice's experience of reality, unified under death, which is framed as a totalizing force that connects and grounds everything to cold, harsh reality. And in the wreckage of that flattening, emerges As If Through Glass's conclusion. The glass has broken. To the realizing teenage agony Anice had been drenched in is confronted with real, tangible loss, as well as the world's callousness towards it. She is initially in denial of that cruelty. The penultimate scene veers into magical realism and shows Karis returning from life as some kind of ephemeral being, ensuring Anice that she's gone to take care of something important, to make things right. But in the final scene/text blog, where the boundaries of character and author blur the most, Anice sees the tragic futility in Karis' promise. Some people just die. The dread looming over so much of the story hasn't been resolved as much as it has been distilled into shape, recognized, and embraced. I'm not sad for no reason anymore. I'm sad for a reason, and I'm scared that if I accept that reason, I'll have to do something about it. I can't pursue trivial things anymore. Of course, I want to live peacefully, but I don't think that's compatible with the world I live in. The game refuses to leave it on such a defeated note, however. Alongside that recognition of the world, something else has formed. In the final lines, Alter writes, "We may not have known everything about each other, or we may not have known much about each other, but I'll see you again, and you're never truly gone." What to do about the world's ills that made Anise, Karis, Emmy, and Sunny the way they are is left uncertain. But at the end of it all, what the story can affirm without a shadow of a doubt is the value of their fleeting connections, the joy in the time they spent together. It's deeper than even "I will make sure to remember you." As the game demonstrates, people trample on those memories all the same. Alter instead insists that no matter how people treated you, or what people remember about you, a human is a human by virtue of existing forever. All we have, at the end of the day, is each other. Is that the message of Æffect Through Glass? It's hard to say, and maybe that's the wrong question. This is one of the most confrontational yet hopeful stories I've ever encountered in this medium. But above all else, I feel like it's a work that is trying to come to terms with the love it contains. Its deeply autobiographical, self-admittedly navel-gazing narrative is incredibly revealing and relatable to the right audience, that being me. But because of that specificity, there is careful nuance in this character's ideas and themes that never lets you sway towards any simplistic conclusion. Like everyone's relationship with the specters of their past, it's very much an ongoing process, one that, hopefully, is steering towards love. But of course, that's easier said than done. If Alter wrote the story, say, 5 years in the future, it might have had a sweeter or messier conclusion. But as another passage in the final text block repeats, I can only write something that's true to me. Let's end off by talking about this line actually. Both in the postmortem and in the text itself, Alter expressed a desire to write stories that are somewhat detached from reality, created from a mismatch of tropes from media that could be enjoyed as escapism. From Epicon's first title, Butterfly Effect, that affection towards high school media is more than obvious. In fact, its entire appeal, for me anyway, is how it twisted those tropes and created something new out of their inspirations, something I've also emphasized with Misericorde and Of the Devil. In general, I've spent a lot of this video talking about how I think inspiration is a great, even existentially important thing to pass on. But works like Æffect Through Glass recognizes the limits of art that is directly derived from something else. There are some things which simply need to come from your real life, the disorienting, structureless experience of our everyday, the specificities of your underrepresented cultural experiences, the granular details of your emotions that paradoxically feel more universally resonating than any convention ever could. That realization is incredibly empowering. You're assured that creating something true to yourself will be inherently valuable and unique, but it's also scary. The skill to convey something so close to your heart to a satisfying degree is immense, and the fear that nobody will resonate with it is real. The reason why I can only write something true to me is repeated in the final passage, I think, is because it is trying to encapsulate the phrase's fascinating duality. Alter's own journey to create Æffect Through Glass, as they tell it, entailed a long process of self-reflection and finding the determination to finish it. But, well, the result of that is this wonderfully honest and idiosyncratic story that is not only moving, but expanded my ideas of what a visual novel, a piece of art, can be and represent. So I think it's a leap worth taking. Ultimately, inspiration and innovation is a nebulous divide, less of two sides of the same coin and more like the double helix of DNA, always circling around and depending on each other to keep moving. What I only mean to say here is that if the first 3 games in this video assured me that the art I've loved my whole life will be celebrated and reinvented, Æffect Through Glass reminded me that I didn't only have to identify with that art, I could contribute to it. With enough passion and emotional vulnerability, I could carve out my own space in that grand cultural canon, and maybe speak to experiences that have been swept under the rug by people or establishments less discerning. To tie it back to the title, isn't that what indie art is all about? If Alter is still watching this far into my dumb video, I just want to say, firstly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for Æffect Through Glass. And secondly, thank you for inspiring me to pick up Ren'Py myself and try to make my own visual novel. One day, I hope to write something as powerful, hopeful, and touching as your game. Looking forward to whatever you and Nebicon's got next. For now though, thank you for watching, thank you Amsterdam Spring Weather for being peak, thank you Gregoraki for Mysterious Skin 2004, and thank you to my patrons, bye bye!